Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Fell in Love with Yugao Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now start the fanfic. Our story starts on Misty Bridge where two battles were happening. One battle was between two legendary ninja that could both be considered titans. These legendary ninja are Kakashi Hatake and Zabuza Momochi. The other battle was between three people. Two bloodline users and the heroine of our story. The first bloodline user was a girl that had accompanied Zabuza here and was the last of the once plentiful Yuki clan. This girl is Haku Yuki. The other bloodline user is an arrogant boy with spiky black hair that is shaped like a duck's. He is also the last of the Uchiha clan. He is Sasuke Uchiha and is stated he is an asshole. The last person is a girl who is the last of the legendary Uzumaki clan, at least last known Uzumaki. She's also the last Namikaze and a partial Senju. This girl has blonde hair that hangs over one side of her face. Her one visible eye was blue and shined with a innocence never seen before. Her skin was tan, but not overly so. On the side of her face that was visible, three whisker-like marks could be seen, giving her an animalistic appearance. Her body was actually pretty well developed considering the circumstances. She was dressed in a black jacket that was unzipped and had the hood down. This revealed her white undershirt with the red butterflies moving across it. She had on red pants to go with this shirt, that had black lines going across the knees. She had on thick black boots with white strings hanging from the top. Starting at each wrist is black tape that covers her entire hand. They are tinges with red right now as Naruto keeps having to wipe blood from her mouth as she's pelted with very sharp and fine needles. Sasuke with his precious 1, Sharingan was trying and failing to keep up with Haku's speed. Haku, hating the fact that she was gonna have to kill her new friend, wished things were different. Drawing her Senbon, she tossed them at both Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke, pissed that this loser was outclassing him, grabbed Naruto and to her horror and Haku's utter shock used the girl as a human shield. The sharp needles penetrated and punctured several of Naruto's organs and even nicked her heart. This action kicked up something inside of Naruto that had been dormant since 2 days after her birth. A gigantic aura of pure energy coated her body and Sasuke Uchiha was literally burned. He screamed as he collapsed on the ground, his arms, part of his face and both of his precious eyes burning away. Haku had to shield herself to keep herself from being permanently blinded by the intensity of the energy. This energy was so powerful that it literally obliterated the mist, exposing the entire unfinished bridge to all. Kakashi was now visible with his hand through Zabuza's chest. Zabuza with wide eyes was shocked that he had been killed so easily. Sakura wasn't paying attention to the two, she was staring at the ice dome and the giant pillar of glowing light. Tazuna, a little terrified, was wondering if Gato could see the light. Said tiny tyrant could indeed see the light, and for some reason it sent shivers down his spine. Inari and Tsunami, who had gathered the people of their villages, Naruto's heroic rescue of them had lit a fire in their very souls. Kakashi, looking at the pillar of light, was very worried, because if Naruto was damaged in any way he might as well kiss his goodbye, as that girl had powerful ties. Naruto inside of the light found herself in a pure white area with nothing around for miles. She wondering where she was as she had just been in a battle with Haku for the fate of Wave. She blinked when someone appeared in the empty space. This someone was literally radiant like the sun on a sunny day. They were also massive as their height easily eclipsed that of Naruto. This kinda terrified her as she had no clue where she was or who this person was. The figure then became visible and Naruto's face turned red. It was gorgeous woman with long flowing black hair and radiant skin that was blemish-free and gorgeous. Her eyes were this mesmerizing cobalt blue, and Naruto could just make out the slitted black pupils. Her nose was normal, which led to her lips that had a thin layer of ruby red lipstick on them. Her black eyebrows were prim and plucked, revealing her nobility. Her frame was perfect as not even the most gorgeous woman could compare to her. She was dressed in a light pink kimono that hugged her frame in all the right ways. This stunning woman had a very happy, yet serene smile on her face. She getting close to Naruto looked down and smiled before she shrunk down to a human size. She was still taller than Naruto, but that wasn't hard. The woman still with her smile said, "Hello Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto blinked several times and asked, "How do you know my name and who are you?" The woman laughing said, "I know your name because I know everything about you. I know that you hate your team. I know that despite Hiruzen's best effort you still remember your birth mother and your birth sisters abandoning you for the Uzumaki clan. I know you blame Sasuke for the death of Makoto Uchiha. I know that sometimes you wish you could just die. I know that you don't hate the Kyuubi for its actions. I know that you know about that old cripple's little hidden forces. I know that you harbor a deep hatred for most of the village hidden in the leaves. I know who you have crushes on, and I know that you adore Tsunade Senju." Naruto's eyes weren't wide but were narrowed as she asked, "Who are you, lady?" The woman laughed softly and said, "I go by many names but the ones most mortals know me as Diana." Naruto's eyes were still narrowed as she asked, "What do you mean most mortals? Are you not human or mortal or something?" Diana smiling said, "No Naruto-chan, I am not mortal or human. For you see I am Izanami no Makoto, the primordial of death, and ever since the death of Izanagi I have gained more titles and powers." Naruto's eyes were wide now as she quickly bowed as low as she could. Diana spotting this said, "No need to bow Naruto." Naruto blinking asked, "Are you sure Diana-sama?" Diana smiling softly said, "I'm sure." This made Naruto stop bowing. Diana then said, "Now allow me to explain where you are, how you got here and what I hope to happen. This Naruto-chan is the waiting room. This is where souls wait to be judged before being sent to either hell or heaven. The bastard Uchiha on your team, essentially killed you when he used you as a human shield. Every part of you is here. You got here due to the small part of me inserted inside of every mortal being. It reacted to your death and sent you here." She paused to let Naruto absorb what she had just learned. Naruto with wide eyes couldn't believe that she was actually dead. She then gulped as Diana could be here to send her to hell for the Kyuubi's sins. Diana ignoring Naruto's gulp said, "Now I'm not here to send you to hell or even to judge you. I dictated that to my daughter Amaterasu. Instead I'm here hoping against hope that one of my greatest dreams will be realized." Naruto blinked hearing this asked, "What dream Diana-sama?" She smiling brightly at Naruto said, "My dreams is for me to have 4 daughters. As my husband is dead and I refuse to take another or lie with another man, I am unable to bear another child." Naruto tilting her head asked, "Why don't you just adopt a girl Diana-sama?" Diana giggling said, "That is my plan Naruto-chan, but it can't just be any girl. No, she has to be pure of heart, have a strong will, and most definitely need a mother in her life." Naruto scratching her head asked, "I don't know anyone like that Diana-sama, do I?" Diana giggling said, "You do Naruto-chan. You know the exact person I'm talking about very well." Naruto now extremely confused asked, "Are you talking about Ayame?" Diana shaking her head said, "No, but Ayame Ichiraku does adore this person." Naruto hearing this started to think about the people Ayame said she adored. The only people Ayame adored was Tuki, who was her father and Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as she pointed at herself and asked, "Me?" Diana nodded and said, "Yes, you Naruto-chan. I want you as my 4th and last daughter. I want you as my baby girl. You're the perfect person, as your heart is pure although you have much hate in it. Your will is titanic as almost nothing can change your mind once it's made up. Most of all you're starving for the affection of a mother." Naruto scratched the back of her head as everything Diana had just said was true. She was about to ask about perks for becoming Diana's child when said woman said, "If you accept, not only will you ascend beyond the limitations of a mortal, but you'd gain 3 loving and overprotective sisters, who'd spoil you rotten. You'd gain the undying love of a mother who would also spoil you rotten." You'd come back to life as a goddess. The Kyuubi wouldn't be killed but sent to Pocket Dimension to be free and be your personal summon. You'll gain 4 unique bloodlines including 3 that will make you a very powerful kunoichi. You'll get 4 main summoning contracts, with one of those 4 having 7 sub-summons. You'll also be a princess of creation. Naruto blinked hearing all of this and asked, these bloodlines, what will they be and what are the 7 sub-summons? Diana said, the first will allow you to transform into a long-dead species of creatures known as kaiju. Kaiju were monsters of immense power and some were revered as gods. Your initial kaiju will be Zilla, a defect version of another kaiju known as Godzilla. You'll be able to unlock more as you grow. The second bloodline is called Anthropomorphize. It allows you to transform into enhanced version of animals with human traits. You gain 9 of these animals. They are as followed. Alicorn, which is a unicorn with the wings of a Pegasus and powers of an earth pony. The Great White Shark, because I really liked sharks and is sad that they were nearly wiped out in the Third Shinobi World War. Bull, because your will. Hippo, rhino and elephant. Because they too were nearly wiped out in the last war. Anaconda, because they're powerful creatures that have all but vanished from the world. Lioness, because you're fierce like the mighty lion. Finally the striped hyena, as I think it fits with your style. She paused to let Naruto absorb this info. She picked back up with, your third bloodline is the power of destruction. This bloodline allows you to harness the very powers of destruction and use it. The last bloodline ties in with your 7 sub-summons. It's called Entity and it allows you to control your 7 sub-summons. These 7 sub-summon are ruthless and merciless killers from another dimension. They literally are an extension of the will of the entity, which is you. These 7 killers are the Trapper, who captures his foes, hangs them and sets traps below them. The Hillbilly, who wields a chainsaw to slash his victims in half. The Wraith, who can vanish while he hunts. The downside to the Wraith is that he can be heard appearing and vanishing. The Nurse, who can teleport across the area, but has a cool-down period. The Hag, who creates traps to summon statues of herself that she can teleport to once tripped. The Shape, who is a ruthless killer who always has an obsession. Finally we have the Doctor, who can shock his victims to make them go insane as he chases them. Naruto whistled hearing this and asked, what is the other 2 summons? Diana smiling said, the legendary Leviathan and the Lion Clan. Naruto hearing all of this had to think for a few minutes. She scratching her face asked, what would happen to Sasuke Tem? Diana said, if you accept he'll be put on trial for attempted murder of a princess. He won't get away with it. Even if you don't accept, I'll make sure he is punished for his crimes. Naruto asked, what about Wave? Diana sighing said, if you don't accept it'll become even worse and Gato will kill Tazuna after making him witness the rape of his daughter and grandson. Naruto's eyes widened hearing this, as sure Inari was an emo but she didn't want that to happen to him. She gaining a determined look said, I accept Diana, but don't think for a second that I'll trust you or call you mom until you've proven yourself to me. The same goes for your 3 daughters. Diana smiled brilliantly hearing this and said, thank you so much Naruto-chan. I'll inform my 3 daughters as soon as you leave. She then pulling Naruto into a hug said, I promise we'll be the family you always needed. She then let Naruto vanish back to the real world. Ending the hug she transformed back into her giant form and said, Amaya, Tsukiko and Setsuna, I can't wait to inform you of your new sister. She then vanished in flash of light. Back on the bridge, Naruto inside of the light suddenly roared as her very blood started to boil. This roar was the start of a transformation. She shot up height from 4.9 feet tall until she stood at a staggering 9 feet 7 inches tall. Her clothes were destroyed from said sudden growth spurt. Her body then became coated in dense charcoal and blood-red scales. Her chest broadened as her arms grew in length and width. These arms gained scales as her hands widened and gained what looked like webbing between the fingers. Thick black claws grew out where the fingernails were. Her legs went through a similar transformation, except for the claws were thicker here, giving it a more lethal look. A thick tail appeared with the point being rounded, yet sharp. Rows of thick and deadly spikes appeared on the back of Naruto's new form. These spikes glowed with a radioactive power, one that the elemental nations had never seen before. Naruto's human eyes quickly shifted into golden crocodilian-like eyes. She then gained about 195 pounds. Naruto was now fully transformed and ready to attack. The light then died down and she dropped onto the bridge. This kicked up a cloud of smoke that made everyone wonder. When it cleared, everyone blanched, even the just arrived Gato. The transformed Naruto was crouched there looking at Haku like prey. Kakashi, taking an actual step back, asked, "In Kami's name, what is that thing?" Naruto then roared and all of Wave was able to hear it. She then vanished and the next thing anyone knew, Haku was literally ripped apart, her guts spilling out along the bridge. Naruto didn't stop there though. No, she rushed directly towards Gato and his thugs. She, reaching the first thug, bit down on his head and with a single movement ripped it from his shoulders. She spitting the now melting head at another thug, who got hit and was knocked unconscious. Naruto then ripped her claws through another thug, removing his throat and internal organs. She then took a deep breath in and everyone could see her spikes glowing. She then unleashed bright neon green flames on some of the thugs, who screamed and started dissolving as if they had been sprayed with acid. Naruto then slammed her tail into a thug, and his entire upper skeleton came out the back of his body. Naruto then slammed her diamond hard head on another thug, crushing him. Naruto then roared as one of thugs tried to attack her. He failed as the next thing anyone knew, he was ripped apart lying on the bridge slowly dying. Naruto then continued the slaughter of the army of thugs. While she was doing this, Gato ran towards his boat and was hurrying the captain to get it started. The captain did so seconds later and set sail going full speed like Gato had asked. Naruto, finished with the thugs on the bridge, looked towards the fleeing boat. She roared again, and to the shock of Kakashi and Tazuna jumped headfirst into the water. Both men quickly rushed to the edge to see what had happened. Their eyes widened, spotting Naruto swimming circles around Gato's boat like it was nothing. Naruto then, diving under the boat, touched the bottom with her feet. She then shot up directly towards the bottom of the boat. She then, to the horror of Gato and the captain, shot straight through the floor and all the way through the boat. She, landing on the top of the boat, roared and unleashed more of her atomic flames on the boat. Gato, running out with a life jacket on, foolishly jumped into the water. Naruto, ignoring the shrieking captain, dived into the water and grabbed the trying to swim away Gato by his legs. Dragging him under, she then proceeded to finish off the scum of a man. She did so by burning him with her atomic flames and dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. Gato screamed and screamed, but with each scream more water filled his lungs. The last thing the tiny tyrant saw before his death was Naruto's mouth full of teeth breathing fire on him. Naruto, once spotting Gato dead, swam back to the bridge and jumped out. Landing on the edge of said bridge, she let loose a loud roar, just as Inari arrived with the rest of Wave. Said boy gained wide eyes, spotting what looked like a dinosaur on the bridge roaring. Kakashi, sliding in front of Tazuna, was prepared to fight this beast if he had to. Naruto, done roaring, felt the transformation starting to go away. This made her shrink down to 6 feet even. Her weight also dropped from 290 pounds to 145 pounds. The scales shrunk until they were minuscule and acting like armor. Naruto's formerly small were no longer small, as they were now double D cups. Her formerly caving and ribs showing stomach turned into a toned and tight stomach. Her arms were now also muscular, but not overly so. Her legs were just as if not more muscular as her arms. Her tail had vanished along with most of the spikes. Her virginal vagina was visible as she was stark. Naruto's now charcoal black hair hung over her face like a veil. Her now golden eyes still had the crocodilian theme, but were now more human and she had better vision. Eyes widened, spotting Naruto, and everyone gasped. This included the fawning over Sasuke Sakura. In a huge gust of wind, Naruto was once again dressed. She was now dressed in a sleeveless black top that showed off her crimson bra. This top stopped just above her belly button. On her hands were padded fingerless gloves, that were red in color with black marks. She had on a tight pair of dark red pants that hugged her hips and like a drunk hugs a toilet or a baby hugs its toy. She didn't have shoes on, as instead she had black bandages wrapped around feet stopping just before her toes. Her Konoha headband was around her neck shining proudly. Sitting on her forehead was a golden tiara with several jewels in it. This crown looked to be worth a shitload of money. Inari with wide eyes asked, "Naruko ne?" Naruko, barely being unconscious as her blood still burned, fell to her knees as she said, "Wave is free. Gato is dead. Enjoy peace." She then fell face first towards the bridge. Inari, ignoring everyone else, rushed to her, praying that she wasn't dead. He, reaching her side with Tsunami right beside him, let out a sigh of relief finding that she was just unconscious. Tazuna, having heard what Naruko had said, felt the tears start pouring down his face. He, falling to his knees, said, "It's over. It's finally over. Gato is dead, Kaiza has been avenged, and Wave can finally know true peace." He, setting his eyes on Naruko, bowed lowly and said, "Thank you, Naruko-sama." Many people joined in on this, and before long a chant of "Thank you, Naruko-sama" could be heard. Inari, ignoring this, helped his mom carry their hero back to their house so she could be comfortable as she rested. Kakashi, with his jaw scraping the ground, had no clue what had happened to Naruko. He then smiled as it worked out in the end. He, turning, instantly noticed the damage to Sasuke. Curious, he picked the boy up, ignoring the cry of Sakura, and carried him to Tazuna's to inspect the injuries. 2 days later, and Naruko was letting Tsunami take care of her longer and thicker hair. The woman had also taken care of her nails and teeth. All of this was being done as she was apparently going to worship in Wave now. Someone had already started a statue of her in her normal form. She had seen what they had planned for her initial kaiju form, and honestly she liked the way it looked. She blinked when Tazuna walked in with yet another yellow-fin tuna for her to eat. She, reaching forward, accepted the fish and ate it all in one bite. She, ignoring the crunching of the fish scales, turned to the window and looked out at the bright skies. She blinked when Inari ran into the room holding what looked like an action figure of herself. Smiling, she asked, "What is that, Inari-kun?" Inari, bouncing with glee, said, "It's your action figure, Nei-chan. It's the badass princess version, with the catchphrase 'Heroes never die.'" Naruko giggled hearing this and asked, "What other action figures are there?" Inari, pulling out the kaiju one, said, "There's the Army Slayer Zilla form, the Nami no Kuni Guardian version, and my favorite version is the limited edition Queen of Mythical Beast version." Naruko, curious about the last two, asked, "Do you have the last two?" He, nodding, ran into his room and came out with a pretty big version of her kaiju form that actually had the spikes painted to look like she was about to breath out her atomic fire. The other one had her dressed in the coat of a mighty lion, with the mane having the Konoha symbol on it. This one was special as it also had her new tiara on it and a sword attached to its hip. Reaching over, she gently picked up the Guardian version and brushed her hand against it. Curious, she asked, "What makes this one so special?" Inari, walking over, lifted up one of the hands to reveal that it only had 4 fingers and said, "This one is special because someone forgot to give it 5 fingers." He, picking up the Queen of the Mythical Beast version, said, "This one is special because as I speak there are only 6 in existence. I have 1 and you have 2. Naruko, hearing this, blinked several times and asked, "When did I get 2? Inari, smiling, said, "They're with your other stuff. Including your tiara and your new fancy kimono." This made one of Naruko's prim and proper eyebrows rise as she asked, "What new kimono?" Tsunami, finishing her braiding of Naruko's hair, said, "The kimono one Amaya no Makoto dropped off, saying something like her new little sister is a princess so she should be dressed like one." Naruko, hearing this, had no clue which one of the trio Amaya was, but she was damned if she was wearing some frilly and most likely stuffy kimono. She then watched as Sakura walked in, wanting to once again talk to her. Naruko rolled her eyes as the pink-haired girl couldn't take the damn hint. Naruko didn't want to talk to her as the pink-haired troll would try to get her to heal what was done to the Uchiha. Naruko was honestly ready for the prick to be punished for his actions. Tazuna then burst into the room with a huge grin on his face. Naruko, curious, asked, "Why are you smiling, old drunk?" He said, "They finished the statue and are setting it up in the middle of the bridge." She blinked hearing this and stood to her feet. Walking forward, she said, "Let's go see it." The family nodded and followed her with a fuming Sakura right behind them. An hour later, and Naruko had a serene smile on her face as she sunk her feet into the sand on the shore of Wave. This was the most absolute peaceful feeling she had ever dealt with. The pink-haired troll known as Sakura Haruno was still bitching about the Uchiha and demanding that the shit be healed. Naruko had to push down the urge to breathe atomic flames on the girl, as at one point they had been friends. That changed when her and Ino started to notice boys in a different way. Now Naruko's only female classmate that was a friend was Ino. Hinata didn't count as the girl was a creep and stalked Naruko. Plus the so-called shy Hyuga girl stared at her too many times with her clan's precious eyes on and healthy blush on her face. So Ino was her only female classmate that was a friend. She wasn't her only female friend, as Naruko had Ayame, Tsunami and her recent friend Anko Mitarashi. Thinking about Anko made the serene smile on Naruko's face broaden as the purple-haired dango-loving woman took no shit and would gut ya with a rusty spoon before letting you to walk all over her. Naruko aspired to be like her and Tsunade as these two women were mighty. She then turned her head and smiled as Inari and a large group of kids came running towards her, all holding their toys. This made her happy as her actions and slaughter of an army of thugs had released the innocents Gato had captured and now kids were allowed to be kids again. She could also feel the oppressive aura around the island slowly going away. This made her smile widen as her actions, she didn't count the Uchiha or the Haruno, but her actions along with the actions of Kakashi had liberated this tiny island country from the greedy hands of a tiny tyrant. She blinked when some villagers walked up to her with several trays of fresh fish. The leader, a woman in her mid-30s, bowed and said, "We bring you fresh offerings from the CO Lady Naruko." Naruko, curious, looked at the fish and could instantly tell that they were common. Smiling softly, she accepted the fish and said, "Thank you for your offerings. I will enjoy these and I grant you the blessing to catch even better fish." They all bowed and thanked her hearing this. The woman with a happy smile on her face said, "We are truly not worthy, Naruko-sama. Your benevolence is legendary." Naruko, smiling at the woman, said, "Hush now, my child. Your village has suffered greatly. You all are more than worthy. Now go relish in the bounty you are sure to pull from the sea and worship me." The woman, bowing, left with a large grin and burning love for Naruko. Naruko smiled watching the woman go and watched as Inari got in an argument with some of his new friends about either Naruko's breath attack, or her skin. She giggled when Inari vehemently insisted that her consumption of several pounds of fish was to power up her awesome green fire. She giggled even more when his friend said all of the fish was give her the stamina to deal with all of their worship. She then watched as all of the kids decided they should ask her. Smiling as the crowd of kids surrounded her, she said, "Both of you are right. I consume so much fish and food in general because my body needs the energy to sustain the immense power in my legs and arms for long period of times. I also consume the food so that I can transform the excess energy into my atomic breath." They all had stars for eyes as Inari asked, "It's not fire?" Naruko, giggling, said, "There are two versions of the attack, Inari. One is indeed an atomic fire that burns just as hot as the sun, while the other is simply me breathing out a concentrated stream of radioactive air, again capable of melting the skin off of an elephant." All the kids awed hearing this and Inari said, "That's awesome, Nei-chan." Shiai, smiling, reached for and patted the boy on the head and said, "Yes, it is." He beamed as his hero and big sister was showing him some affection. She then, knowing that she was still hungry, said, "Go on, little ones, go play. I have some food to collect and consume." Inari, watching as his friends ran off to play knowing that they would wait for him, asked, "Are you about to transform into your kaiju form again, Ne-chan?" She, smiling softly at him, said, "No, my dear Inari. I'm going to give another of my bloodlines a try." He, curious, asked, "You have more than one bloodline, Ne-chan?" She, nodding and sliding her top off, leaving herself in her bra, said, "I have a total of 4 bloodlines, but who knows how many more I could possibly gain. Your village was witness to my main bloodline, which I will call Kaiju Awakening. The bloodline I'm about to use to gather me some more nutrients is called Anthromorphize." He, curious, asked, "What does it do?" She, giggling as she pulled down her pants revealing the shorts she was wearing as underwear, said, "Basically it allows me to transform into a humanized animal. Since I'm going to hunt for my food around here, I'll be using 1 or 2 of the 9 animals I have." He, with stars for eyes, asked, "What animal are you going to transform into?" She, sliding her Konoha headband around her neck, said, "The ultimate aquatic killing machine that is sadly nearly extinct. I'm talking about the legendary great white shark." Inari, hearing this, gained wide eyes and asked, "Really?" She, nodding, shut her eyes and tapped into the primal feeling rolling around her body. She instantly had to bite her lip as an intense pain ripped through her body. She could actually feel her body starting to change though. She shot up in height until she was easily 15 feet tall. Her skin darkened until it was actually pitch black, with her stomach, neck, inside of her arms and hands, inside of her thighs and legs and bottom of her feet were white. A thick shark-like tail appeared behind her and swayed lazily. The signature dorsal fin of all sharks grew from her back. She, feeling her teeth disconnect from her jaw, felt herself gain a lot of weight to match that of the great white shark. She, turning to the star-struck Inari, waved to him and said, "Go play, Inari. After I eat we can talk and play." He, nodding, watched as she jumped into the ocean and was soon gone. This was so cool to him and he couldn't wait to tell his friends. It would be a week later and Naruto and her so-called teammate, and she used the term loosely, were ready to head back to Konoha. Naruto was literally one more session of Sakura's constant bitching from gutting the pink-haired troll and blaming Zabuza. The Uchiha thankfully was sealed in a scroll to keep him from being damaged even more from his own actions. Kakashi was nose-deep in his little book and Naruto was pretty sure the man was doing so to keep from hurting Sakura. Naruto was snapped out of her thoughts by Inari handing her what looked like a card. Curious, she looked at it and couldn't stop the giggle that came out of her mouth. It was a card of her in her great white form. What made this card funny was that it had her name and some made-up stats, plus a silly attack. She, looking at him, asked, "What is this?" Inari, smiling brightly, reached into his pocket and revealed about 30 cards. He, still smiling, said, "It's called War of Monsters, or War for short. The cards are based off of you, Kakashi-san, and other people." She, curious, now looked at the card she had and noticed that it seemed to shine. He, smiling, said, "That's the limited edition Great White Shark Naruto card. It's a top-tier card that pretty much destroys all other cards." She, hearing this, asked, "Why are you giving me this?" He, smiling and revealing another card, this one of her sitting on the beach, said, "Because I have this one. It's Serenity Naruto and it's another top-tier card, along with Kaiju Naruto and Goddess Naruto. In your bag I placed one of each." She blinked hearing this and reached into her bag. She was shocked when she pulled out 3 more cards. She, looking at the 3 new cards, smiled as the Goddess Naruto was the one of her smiling and playing with the kids. Putting all 4 cards back into her bag, she leaned forward and kissed Inari in the middle of his forehead. She, drawing back and ignoring the intense blush on his face, said, "This is my blessing to you, Inari. I bless you with the luck of the devil. Every game you play you shall win. Every gamble you take shall pay out big time. I also bless you with the might of the kaiju. Your strength is now 1,000 times of that it was before, and your courage knows no bound." Inari, hearing this, gained a beaming smile as he said, "Thanks, Ne-chan." She giggled and replied with, "You're welcome." She, then turning to the rest of the people of Wave and with a serene smile said, "I bless all of you and grant you the protection of the tides." She then titled her head as the sun shined brightly on everyone in the village for a few minutes. Nodding to herself, she said, "See you later." She then took off towards Konoha, following behind Kakashi and Sakura, who had already taken off. A few miles down the road, Naruto found herself zoning out of Sakura, who was once again bitching about her Sasuke-kun. Naruto was really thinking about what kind of ramen she wanted when she got back to Konoha and the serious talk she was having with the old man. She wanted off of Team 7, not because of Kakashi, because she hated both of her supposed teammates, not to mention the Uchiha bastard had tried to use her as a human shield. Honestly, if it weren't for divine intervention, she'd be dead right now, and the bastard would also most likely be dead. She also started to think about her new family, as she hadn't really heard a word from her new sisters besides Amaya apparently dropping off her new kimono, which she hated to admit she liked. She figured the other two were trying to come up with a way to approach her. Diana, on the other hand, seemed to be preparing something. Naruto wasn't quite sure what it was, but she had the feeling it was going to be big and most likely dramatic. She blinked, finding the group surrounded by Anbu. Turning to the wide-eyed Kakashi, she asked, "What the hell is going on?" A purple-haired Anbu with a cat mask walked up and said, "Naruto no Makoto, we have been dispensed to collect you, Hitaki Kakashi, Haruno Sakura, and the accused Uchiha Sasuke." Naruto blinked and tilted her head as she asked, "Dispensed by who?" She easily ignored the wide eyes of Kakashi and the outrage on the face of Sakura. The purple-haired Anbu said, "Lady Diana, Lady Amaya, Lady Tsukiko, and Lady Setsuna." This statement made Naruto blink as she asked, "All four of them are in Konoha?" The purple-haired Anbu nodded and said, "Yes, and Lady Diana informed the Hokage and the village of your new status along with what happened in Wave. They are currently awaiting Uchiha Sasuke so he can be put on trial for attempted murder of the Princess of Destruction and Sister of Creation." Naruto, tilting her head, asked, "Princess of Destruction? When did I become the Princess of Destruction?" The purple-haired Anbu said, "If you will allow us to escort you to Konoha, I'm sure Lady Diana will gladly explain." Naruto, sighing, said, "Very well, but the old man had better be there." The purple-haired Anbu nodded, and instantly Team 7 were surrounded by the four Anbu, with the purple-haired Anbu sticking closely to Naruto. Naruto, knowing just who the purple-haired Anbu is, gained and blushed as she was being escorted by one of her crushes. This led her to start thinking along the lines of wondering if her crush liked her and other things. This basically made her snap away from the real world. She would come back a few minutes later and find herself in seat beside Diana above the council. Shaking her head, she blinked as Sasuke had apparently been unsealed and was now being grilled by a female who looked awfully like Diana, but with stormy gray eyes. She then heard the woman ask, "So you admit to trying to use one Naruto no Makoto, formerly Naruto Uzumaki, as a human shield, and that you have not an ounce of remorse for doing so?" She rolled her eyes when Sasuke, in a show of his pure stupidity, said, "The Dobi should be happy. She provided me the perfect cover. As an elite, it is my right to use her and the other weak whore as I see fit." Diana, hearing this, turned to the civilian council, who looked like someone had just Sparta kicked their puppy off a cliff into the abyss. She then said, "There is your confession. The arrogant trash just admitted his wrongs, thus it is now time for his punishment." Eyes widened and Sakura was about to screech when Naruto, sensing what was coming, said, "Sakura Haruno, if you open your mouth to say a word, I swear on all things ramen and all things good, I will gut you like the worthless piece of trash you are. Now sit down, shut your mouth, and pretend for a second that the large forehead of yours does indeed hold an equally large brain." Jaws dropped, eyes widened, and Kakashi dropped his book. Diana, smiling softly at Naruto, said, "I take it the pink-haired one has been grating on your nerves since Wave." Naruto, nodding, said, "She hasn't stopped bitching since Kakashi sealed the bastard up. Honestly, I have an headache from all of it." Diana, hearing this, said, "All right, Masumi, we'll get finished with the things here and then I'll have your new bodyguard escort you to your new home." Naruto, hearing this, blinked several times and asked, Why exactly do I need a bodyguard and what new home? Diana smiling and turning to Sasuke said, Uchiha Sasuke, you will be given 4 punishments. The first of your punishments will come from my eldest daughter Amaya no Makoto. Naruto watched as the female with the blazing aura and simmering hatred in her eyes stood up and said, your punishment from me is that you Uchiha Sasuke will never activate your Sharingan, and even if you have children they'll never activate it. She then sat down ignoring the wide eyes and jaw drop of the civilians. Diana said, next will come from Tsukiko no Makoto. Naruto watched as the woman with princess curls in her hair and a suffocating hatred burning in her eyes stood up. She looking at Sasuke with hatred hissed, you tried to kill my new little sister. I want you dead, but mother insists that would be rewarding you. Instead I'll take away your usage of chakra beyond that needed to live. She then sat down ignoring the wide eyes and how Naruto was looking at her. Diana shaking her head at how protective Tsukiko was already said, next will be Setsuna no Makoto. The woman from before, the one that had been grilling the Uchiha stood up and said, I absolutely hate you. You're an arrogant piece of shit, who is not only a coward but a weak little spoiled brat. Now don't get me wrong, I just don't hate you for trying to kill my sister. I hate you because you don't even the slightest remorse for your actions. Thus your punishment is to be locked up in the deepest darkest pit possible, chained to the walls and vultures feasting on your cowardly cuts. This will not kill you as you will be healed every day. Lola. Anyone get this reference? Everyone flinched hearing this one, but Naruto. She simply smiled, already liking Setsuna as she had come up with a way to torture the bastard without killing him. Diana quite shocked said, next will be the youngest Naruto no Makoto. Naruto hearing this stood up and said, I simply hate you, there's no other way around it and no sugarcoating it. I despise you with my very core and think that honestly it'd be awesome if you went to rot in a ditch somewhere, but I digress. You tried to use me as a human shield, thus, your punishment is to be impaled by spears and lances every day, while the vultures feast on your stomach and intestines. Not only that, but each day your senses will be jacked up, so that you feel every single rip, every single stab. You feel everything with supreme clarity. She then sat back down and many people were shocked, as this punishment was hell on earth. Setsuna, Amaya and Tsukiko all smiled at her. Diana shaking her head said, now it's my turn. She gaining a very dark look on her face said, my punishment for you is that you'll never be able to impregnate someone. Nor will you be able to see. The emptying of your bladder will be the most excruciating pain you've ever felt, and the voiding of your bowels will be like someone pulling out your spine through your. You'll never sleep again, as every time you even try to sleep, you'll have nightmares so horrible, that they'll leave you bloody and broken for months. This my punishment to you Uchiha Sasuke. Silence permeated the room hearing this final punishment be spoken. Sakura trembling was silently crying at this. Sasuke with rage rolling off of him screamed, you can't do this to me. I'm an elite. I'm an Uchiha. Diana snorting said, no you are nothing, be gone. She then waved her hand and Sasuke Uchiha was gone, his just desserts finally be served to him. Naruto turning to Diana asked, now that he's been dealt with. What's this nonsense about an Anbu escort and new home? Setsuna said, you're a princess now, little sister. No matter how much you will deny this, it's the truth. This means that the dangers of being a princess are now going to be a constant in your life. Amaya and Tsukiko wanted to force you to retire from active service and move you to the home in heaven. I told them no, as you're a warrior and would rather die than do something like that. Mother agreed. They then tried to reason that you should have 2 entire squadrons of Anbu guarding you at all times. I reasoned with them how stupid and irritating that would be and managed to get it down to just 1. You will have 1 Anbu guarding you at all times, despite the fact that could probably handle anything thrown at you. Naruto absorbing everything Setsuna had just said asked, which Anbu? Tsukiko and Amaya giggled and said, cat. Naruto hearing this instantly didn't mind having an Anbu bodyguard. Diana said, as for you new home. It's what used to be the Uchiha clan estate. It's been remolded so that it looks nothing like it did before. It's also been enhanced due to your bloodline and new need to feed heavily. I left a book for you that explains the enhancements. I have also left several books and scrolls on the proper princess conduct and several books on your divine rights as a member of royalty. Please at least read over the last ones. Naruko nodding rubbed her temples as her headache was now roaring. She smiled softly when the cat-masked Anbu appeared looking ready for war. This made her giggle a little as her crush was taking her job very seriously. Getting up she asked, Diana, please have some ramen delivered to my new home as I plan on curling up into a tight ball and sleeping for the next few hours, at least until this headache is gone. She then walked out of the council chambers, the purple-haired Anbu closely following her. Diana turning to the council said, now for the punishment of the civilian council, one Haruno Sakura and Hatake Kakashi. Eyes widened hearing this, and Hiruzen suddenly got the feeling that his problems were about to lessen instead of increase. Naruko doing exactly as she had said she was could now be found curled up in her very large bed that her color scheme printed on it. All of the lights were off and Naruko was down to her night clothes. The Anbu still wearing her mask was in the shadows of the room kinda being a creep, but doing her job of being Naruko's bodyguard. The woman behind the mask, one Azuki Yugao, was trying her hardest not to just stare at Naruko with lust and love, but damn if the girl wasn't gorgeous and now a princess. Yugao cutting her eyes to the window could see the sun starting to set, meaning night would soon be here. She wondered if Naruko would wake up for something to eat or if the girl would just sleep through until tomorrow. She shifting her eyes back to Naruko watched as the girl gently started to gnaw on her pillow. It would be adorable if it weren't for the fact that the pillow was slowly being shredded like fresh meat. This terrified her, as if Naruko went to give her a hickey or tried to bite her during, it could rip her apart, literally. She sighing hated to wake Naruko up, but the newborn goddess did need to eat a lot of food to sustain her incredible powers. Walking over she gently started to shake the girl. Naruko waking up instantly sat up and yawned, ignoring the feathers stuck to her mouth for the moment. Yugao on the other hand giggled as the feathers stuck to Naruko's face gave her an even more adorable look. Naruko ignoring the giggling of her escort and wondered what time it was. She cutting her golden eyes to the window blinked as it was just getting dark. Apparently she had slept for 5 hours as it was still midday when they had arrived in the village. Getting out of her much more comfortable bed she asked, was the ramen delivered? Yugao shaking her head said, no, my princess. Naruko hearing this sighed just as her stomach roared. She knew that she needed to eat but didn't want to venture into the village until all of the bullshit her new status and the punishment of the Uchiha had blown away. She grabbing one of the books about the enhancements her new home had gone through flipped through several pages until she came across the one about how the back door functioned as a transporter. It could take her to any of the 8 pocket dimensions which had been set up by her sisters and mother to be teeming with prey species for her to eat. This would explain why the ramen wasn't sent, she had her own food now. Setting the book down for later she walked into the bathroom and changed into her regular clothes. She walking out slipped her headband around her neck and said, I'm about to go out on a hunt, Kat-san. Yugao hearing this blinked and asked, where? Naruko shaking the rest of her sleepiness out of her said, the back door is in transporter to 8 pocket dimensions that haven been set up into different environments for me to hunt the abundant prey species my mother and sisters set up for me. Yugao understanding now said, I am ready to follow you, Lady Naruko. Naruko rolling her eyes said, you can just call me Naruko, ya know. Yugao giggled and said, I can't, as it is my job to protect you. Naruko rolled her eyes even more and headed towards the back door, already having a clue on what she wanted to eat and where to hunt. She pressing her hand gently on the door blinked when suddenly she was in a pure white room standing across from Amaya. Said goddess blinked, spotting her little sister as she expected her to still be asleep, as she and the others were still locked in a heated debate with the civilian council and Haruno Sakura. The pink-haired girl insisted that she was only trying to help Naruko, but Setsuna wasn't having any of that horseshit. The civilians were more normal as they were begging, pleading and even trying to bribe their way out of the justified punishment. Naruko confused asked, Amaya-san. Amaya shaking her head waved her hand and the room transformed into Naruko's bedroom in the home up in heaven. Naruko finding herself seated on a massive bed blinked and looked around. She looking at the walls smiled as her color scheme could be seen here along with her more insane plans. This included her plan to accidentally kill the cat known as Tora and blame it on the Tem. She could also see many of the toys she had always wanted when she was younger and the black eyeliner she had pilfered from that bitchy elder. Amaya smiling said, Welcome dearest little sister to your royal room up in heaven. You can call this place whatever you like as I call my room the war room. Naruko hearing this nodded and asked, Why am I here? Amaya sighing said, It was decided someone would need to talk to you about your princess duties and the other things being a princess entails. We knew you wasn't going to read the books and scrolls so I decided to be the one to inform you. Also we need you to know that in any environment you decide to go to, you're the ultimate predator. This pretty much means that anything and everything is on the menu. Now then as a princess. She then went on a long-winded speech that Naruko forced herself to listen to. Amaya finishing said, Most of that stuff was trivial but there are some important things in there. Like for instance as a princess you're allowed to have as many concubines as you like. Another is that you're allowed to have a massive harem if you so wished. The most important one is that if you make a law, it is to be adhered without hesitation. Naruko understanding all of this asked, Is there anything else? Amaya not wanting to head back to the debate nodded. Naruko blinked and found herself in Amaya's arms as the goddess of the sun and flames hugged her tightly and cloaked the both of them in a warmth Naruko had never felt before. This made Naruko nuzzle into the extremely warm hug. Amaya feeling this said, This isn't just a regular hug dear sister. I'm giving you another bloodline. Naruko hearing this nuzzled even deeper into the hug and said, I don't care. This is the absolute best hug I've ever been given. Amaya giggled and said, That would be due my natural warmth. She nuzzling Naruko's head said, The bloodline I'm giving you is called Aura of the Sun. It basically allows you to harness the power of the sun and all flames. In fact if it can be considered a heat source, then you can harness it. You'll never be cold, unless you want to be in raging blizzard will just feel like a rainy day. Naruko nodding to the words she was hearing asked, Why wasn't the ramen delivered? Amaya said, Because we're still in a debate with the wretched civilians and your former teammate. Naruko hearing this blinked and asked, Former? Amaya smiling said, Mother after hearing how the girl defended her heinous actions struck down the notion of Team 7 and removed you from it post-haste. She didn't remove you from the ninja program in general. In fact we were working on getting you Anko Mitarashi as your sensei and you her apprentice. Naruko hearing this giggled as she and Anko already created all kinds of hell now, if she became the apprentice of Anko, then the world had better watch out. Amaya giggling also said, Your Gigi actually pleaded with us to not do that, as he couldn't handle the amount of paperwork that would cause. Naruko giggled even more as the old man did have a burning hatred for the stacks of paper known as paperwork. Amaya said, So instead we got you Tsunade Senju, who is on her way back to the village as we speak, will be your sensei. This means you'll have to learn some medical ninjutsu. Naruko hearing this shrugged and said, That's fine as I've always wanted to learn how to heal people, so that I can help Konohamaru and his friends whenever they get hurt doing something I would do. Amaya laughed and asked, You do realize that you just proclaimed that the things you do are dangerous? Naruko laughing said, Of course the things I do are dangerous, but they're also crazy, inane, adventurous and most importantly fun. Amaya chuckled hearing this, but then sighed as it seemed it was time for her to get back to the debate. She ending the hug said, I have to go back in. Have fun on your hunt and don't aim small. Naruko nodded and blinked as she was once again at her back door, her hand still pressed to it. Cracking her neck, she decided that she was going with the Serengeti as she wondered what zebra tasted like. 2 hours later, and Naruto could be seen in her lioness form slowly creeping up on an entire herd of zebra. She liked this form as it tapped into her primal needs and her hunger was roaring. All of her senses were heightened and her muscles felt more powerful than before. She, licking her lips, could already taste the zebra. Her nose then twitched, catching the scent of Yugao up in one of the trees a good distance away. She could also smell the male lions roaming the area like they owned the place. She didn't really care just as long as they didn't with her hunt. Her perfect chance then arrived and she sprung out of the grass and latched onto the neck of the zebra she was inches from. She, taking it down within 2 seconds, used a burst of speed and a jump to take down another one, avoiding its deadly kicks with the ease of a ninja. She, having now killed 2 zebra, took off running and went for the third kill. She, managing to strike it down, also roared in victory. Shaking her head, she dragged the third body over to her other 2 and sat down to eat. She, halfway through the first zebra, looked up to spot the 2 male lions heading her way. She, getting up, growled, not liking that these 2 were about to try to weasel their way into her meal. She, standing to her full height, stared the 2 down. They didn't seem to get the message that she wasn't sharing as they approached. She didn't even hesitate to jump into action. In a matter of seconds, she had her jaw clamped down on the throat of one of the male lions, pressing down, while the other was slowly bleeding out not feet from her meal. The 2 male lions stood no chance in hell against her, as she was a trained kunoichi who killed for a living. She finished with the now dead second male lion, moved back to her meal and went back to eating her well-deserved meal. She, ignoring the whimpering of the still dying first male lion, finished 2 out of her 3 zebra and then moved on to the dead male lion. She started with his lower body and continued to eat her way up until all that was left was the head and mane of the mighty beast. She, looking at the other lion and her last zebra, decided that she was going to freeze the zebra and leave the male for the scavengers. Shaking her head, she stood up and grabbed the zebra. She smiled when it was transported back to her home. Running towards where her bodyguard was seated, Naruto enjoyed the feeling of the grass crunching underneath her padded feet. She loved the feeling of the crisp night air running through her fur and flowing through her hair. She, reaching the tree Yugao was perched in, shifted back into her human form and giggled as Yugao was being played with by a family of monkeys. Naruto found this funny as it reminded her of her situation with Konohamaru and his friends. Granted, Konohamaru could speak perfect English and wouldn't throw his shit at you. She, letting a little of her aura come to light, watched as the monkeys scattered. Climbing up the tree, she sat down beside Yugao and asked, "Are you ready to go back?" Yugao, shaking her nose, said, "Not yet. This setting is peaceful and there's no one trying to seduce or kill you here." Naruto, nodding, sat back in the tree branch and started to hum a lovely tune. She, humming this tune, didn't even notice when Yugao turned to stare at her, wondering where she learned this tune. Naruto, feeling deeply at peace, continued to hum the lovely tune, ignoring when she literally started to glow and nature started to surround her and bloom. Yugao noticed though and could see the lion cubs playing around the tree they were in. She could also see that the monkeys were back and one was even sitting in Naruto's lap. Naruto, opening her mouth a little, said, "Because there's got to be something out there. If I fly high enough, I'll find it somewhere. So I'll hold my breath until I float away. Maybe I'll come down someday." Yugao gained hearts for eyes hearing this and pictured Naruto someday singing lovely songs to their children. Naruto, opening her eyes, blinked, spotting all of the wildlife around her. She, looking down at her lap, could spotting the baby monkey taking a nap in her lap. To her, this was the most adorable thing she'd ever seen, and she wondered if someday this would be hers and Yugao's child. She then giggled as she could already see their child. Their firstborn would be a little girl with her hair and Yugao's eyes. She then pictured their second child, and it would be a headstrong little boy with Yugao's hair and her eyes. Their daughter would have the hardest time trying to keep her little brother out of trouble, and Naruto would just giggle as she nursed their third child, which would be another girl. Of course, Naruto would be wearing the Hokage hat by then, and Yugao would be retired from the Anbu Corps. She giggled as a retired Yugao would most likely be a very bored person and that would lead to lots of and plenty of baby making. She shaking her head to get out of the daydream state she was in picked up the monkey and sit him down in the tree. She jumping down said, "Come on Anbu-san, let's go back home." Yugao nodding jumped down and said, "You can call me by my name Princess Naruto." Naruto giggling watched as their portal home appeared and said, "I know this Yu-chan but I like calling you Anbu-san." She then walked into the portal followed closely by a beaming Yugao. 2 days later and Naruto was relaxing in her kitchen as Yugao was on another mission. Naruto had her 3 little brats as acting bodyguards. Of course she also had some Anbu actually guarding her as Konohamaru, Moegi and Udon were here more for her to play with, spoil. She hearing Konohamaru enjoy the pool in her backyard moved over to the pot she had on the stove. She was cooking her 3 brats a wonderful lunch. Of course Ino was also coming over later for lunch. Naruto smiling stirred the moose and rattlesnake stew. There were other things in the stew but she knew that the main components were moose and rattlesnake. She smelling it knew that it needed to cook more. Reaching into her cabinet she pulled down some fruit. This fruit was fresh as she and Ino had picked it just yesterday when Team 10 had been requested by her to guard her. She chopping the apples and the pears down added them into the stew along with some red peppers and onions. She stirring the pot smiled as it smelled wonderful. Turning she moved over to the salad she was preparing to go with this stew and pondered on when she should start going out on missions again. She turned hearing footsteps approaching. A brilliant smile blossomed on her face spotting Ino walk in. She and Ino had actually taken their friendship a step further while picking fruit and were now a couple. Ino was her bae and she was Ino's boo. Ino a little pissed off that her former friend Sakura had tried to weasel her way into her quality time with Naruto, sat down on the bar stool Naruto had set up at the island in her kitchen. Ino sighed peacefully as the smell of whatever Naruto was cooking hit her nose. Naruto being able to tell that Ino was upset opened her mouth and sang, "I found a love, for me. Darling just dive right in. Follow my lead. I found a girl, beautiful and sweet. I never knew that you were the someone waiting for me. We were just kids when we fell in love. Not knowing what it was. I will not give you up this time. Darling just kiss me slow. You heart is all I own. In your eyes you're holding mine." Ino swooned and picked up with, "Baby I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms. Barefoot on the grass, listening to our favorite song. When you said you looked a mess, I whispered underneath my breath, but you heard it. Darling you look perfect tonight." Naruto grabbing Ino's hand and slowly swaying continued with, "I found a woman. Stronger than anyone I know. She shares my dreams, I hope that someday I'll share her home. I found a lover, to carry more than just my secrets. To carry love, to carry children of our own." Ino with a serene smile on her face said, "We are still kids, but we're so in love. Fighting against all odds. I know we'll be alright this time. Darling just hold my hand, be my girl, I'll be your man. I see my future in your eyes. Baby I." Naruto now feeling the 3 brats now inside knew that the audience had widened as she said, "Dancing in the dark, with you between my arms. Barefoot on the grass, listening to our favorite song. When I saw you in that dress, looking so beautiful. I don't deserve this, darling you look perfect tonight." Ino with hearts for eyes and now swooning placed her head on Naruto's neck as the two of them danced to the incredible song the entire estate was hearing. Naruto spinning Ino picked up with, "Baby I'm dancing in the dark. With you between my arms. Barefoot on the grass. We're listening to our favorite song. I have faith in what I see. Now I know I have met an angel in person. She looks perfect. I don't deserve this, you look tonight." The song now finished and Ino was in paradise. She looking Naruto in the eyes leaned forward and two had their first kiss. Moegi cheered as this was amazing. Konohamaru wiping the tears from his eyes tried to put on a brave front, like he wasn't crying at the super romantic scene he had just witnessed. Udon on the other hand had no problem crying as to him the scene he had just witnessed was confirmation that his Oni-chan was a hopeless romantic. Naruko, ending the kiss because Ino was starting to lose her air, giggled and asked, "Did you enjoy the performance, Gigi?" The old Hokage, walking into the home along with the returned Yugao, chuckled and said, "Indeed I did, Naruko. I'm so happy that Konoha's Princess of Destruction is such a hopeless romantic." Naruko, sticking her tongue out at him, said, "You're just mad that no one in their right mind would sew something like this for you." He, rolling his eyes, sat down at one of the stools and asked, "What's cooking?" Naruko, setting her eyes on Yugao, who was extremely jealous of Ino, said, "Lunch. Don't worry, Yu-chan, once we start dating you'll get a super romantic scene like this." Yugao, hearing this, went from being jealous to being excited. Naruko laughed, sensing this. She turned to her stew and smiled and said, "It's ready. Time for lunch." The three kids, hearing this, were instantly seated and had bowls in front of them, adoring Naruko's cooking. Ino, back seated, was in the same state as the kids, as Naruko had gotten her eating right with the food she cooked. Yugao, also seated, had removed her mask and was ready for the pure deliciousness that was Naruko's cooking. Sarutobi, seated, also planned on eating a hearty lunch before getting back to the evil known as paperwork and waiting for Tsunade to arrive. Naruko, giggling, served everyone a healthy portion of her stew along with the salad she had prepared. Sitting down herself, she smiled and said, "Enjoy." This was the cue for everyone to dig into the meals. Seconds later, both Ino and Yugao moaned from how scrumptious the food was. The three kids followed the two women seconds later, and Konohamaru started to float. The next day, and Naruko was happy as she was once again an active ninja of the village, as her new sensei had finally arrived in the village. Tsunade had instantly wanted to know everything she could about Naruko, and said princess had been happy to help. Now Naruko was learning the healing arts of shinobi and so far could heal a fish. It wasn't a lot of progress, but considering that she had started in just a day, it was something. Right now Naruko was preparing for a mission, as Tsunade, realizing that Naruko was way too talented for the chores known as D-rank missions, had gotten her a C-rank mission. It is Bandit Camp mission. Naruko was to wipe it completely out, and Naruko felt that this gave her the perfect chance to use her power of destruction and entity bloodline. Depending on how many bandits there were, she might use her entity bloodline. She turned to Konohamaru and said, "All right, Kono, keep an eye on the house, eat the meals I've prepared for you, and make sure Ino eats her lunch." Konohamaru, nodding, said, "You got it, boss." She giggled and walked out of her home. She blinked, spotting her loyal Anbu guard girlfriend standing by the door. Yugao, with a small smile on her face, handed Naruko the folder holding the info with her mission. She, leaning forward, captured Yugao in a tender kiss, loving the fact that she was 6 feet tall and had the height advantage over both of her girlfriends. In fact, she had the height advantage over most people, including her sensei. Granted, Tsunade had her when it came to size, but that was okay, as when Tsunade started talking about boring shit, Naruko would just stare at those bra busters and imagine what it would be like to squeeze said objects. Shaking her head, she walked towards the gate to get started on her mission. 2 days later, and Naruko was rubbing her temples as the info was outdated. Not only had the single bandit camp expanded, but now was under the leadership of several missing ninja from Kumo and Iwa. She had taken out several of the smaller bandit camps using some of her normal ninja skills. She was literally a mile away from the next camp and she had an headache. She, being able to smell the missing ninja from here, placed her hand on the ground and used a pulse of chakra to get a layout of the camp. Her eyes widened, spotting the many bandits. This camp was packed and she didn't like it. Standing up, she figured it was time for some destruction. She, closing her eyes, searched through the maze that was her mind and found the pure destruction that was her bloodline. Smiling, she moaned a little as the power of destruction was like ramen, Ino's extremely kissable lips, and Yugao's spicy tuna roll. It was damn addictive and she felt like she was getting high off of it. Shaking her head, she started to walk forward, ignoring when small black balls of pure destruction started to appear around her. She, walking into the bandit camp, watched as the many thugs and bandits turned to her. One of the more idiotic thugs licked his lips and said, "Oh look boys, something to play with." Naruto, ignoring this obvious statement, lifted up her hand and said, "I'll give you this one chance to give up." Another bandit, laughing, said, "Yeah, right." She sighed and focused the power of destruction around her, creating a pitch-black aura around herself. She, staring the wide-eyed bandits in the eyes, said, "Get ready to die, fools." She, lifting her hand up, created several balls of black energy. She, lowering her hand, said, "Destruction style, beyond the grave jutsu." The 12 balls of destruction quickly became 10,000. These balls of pure destruction shifted until they were shaped like bullets. The thugs and bandits only had time to shit their pants before the bullets came raining down like raindrops. Naruto, not even flinching, walked on as people and places started to be obliterated, leaving nothing but gaping holes. Naruto shut her eyes and moaned as she could feel each bullet land and could feel it devour all that it touched. It was euphoric, and Naruto could already tell it was gonna be like her precious ramen. Shaking her head, she placed her hand on the ground and groaned, as apparently there was one last camp to slaughter, and this looked to be the largest. Standing back up, she shook her head, as after this camp she would be finished and could get back to her wonderful home and her lovely girlfriends. This brought a serene smile to her face, as her lovely girlfriends were most likely busy doing their own missions or training their off. Hopefully a little of both, as Ino did need to get stronger, and the only way to do so was to train. Yugao also wanted to get stronger, and Naruto figured she could do so by training extra hard, plus plenty of missions. Shaking her, Naruto jumped into the air and vanished, leaving the smoking remains of what was once a bandit camp behind. 2 hours later, and Naruto was staring at the last bandit camp, and she wasn't impressed. This camp was the largest camp she had ever seen, with over 500 bandits and thugs roaming around. Of course, the missing ninja were the leaders of the camp. She, not feeling like dealing with this many idiots, created several clones and had them spread out. Her plan was to surround the camp and activate her entity bloodline. She, feeling that her clones had the place surrounded, pulled out a kunai and cut the palm of her hand. Knowing that her clones were doing the same, she let the blood drop onto the ground below. All of her clones did the same. She, feeling that the perimeter was now sealed by her blood, activated her bloodline. She felt darkness overtake her senses, but she quickly called out, summoning jutsu, the shape. Suddenly the bandit camp transformed into a large area with many housed and several hooks. Naruto could see a playground in the distance, along with what looked some hedges. She then blinked as something informed her that this place was called Haddonfield. She then witnessed her killer appear. She shivered, as he was a creep in the worst way. Shaking her head, she started to whisper things to the creep, ordering him to murder and sacrifice the idiots that belonged in the camp. He did nothing but started to move forward. He quickly came across a group of 4 idiots and sliced them one by one until they were all badly bleeding as they fled for their lives. She giggled, as the looks on their faces was priceless. She then witnessed her summon literally shrug off several high-powered jutsu. She found this interesting, as if someone had thrown that many powerful attacks at her, she'd be in trouble right now. She felt her jaw drop when her summon actually grabbed one of the missing ninja and put him directly on a hook. She moaned, as her being the entity meant that the fools were being fed directly to her. It was near orgasmic, feeling the souls draining into her. This effect was increased when her summon hooked more of the fools. Since they had no clue on what to do or how to help their friends, they were screwed, and she was stuck in a near-orgasmic state for quite some time. She growled when one of the higher-powered missing ninja managed to unhook himself. She, turning to the shape, whispered into his ear to murder this one as he dared to unhook himself. She laughed as the missing ninja begged and pleaded for his life, as all of his minions and friends were slowly being fed to her. The shape picked this one up and stabbed him, ending his wretched life. She then shut her eyes as the rest died on the hooks. She did have an orgasm from this, as the influx of people and souls being fed to her was supreme. When she opened her eyes, the shape was gone and her bloodline was off. She, looking down at her body, sighed as she needed to get home and change panties, as the ones she was wearing were soaked. Turning around, she blinked as she swore she could feel someone behind her. Slowly turning, she activated her kaiju eyes. She found herself eye-to-eye hole with two groups of hunter ninja. One was from Kumo with their cloud-like insignia sitting proudly on the headband. The other group was from Iwa as the rock symbol could be seen. Naruto, wondering if she should be worried about these guys, was about to turn and unleash an atomic breath on them when she remembered about her situation. Sighing, she turned back in the direction of Konoha and said, "For I am the entity. Devourer of souls and summoner of the wretched, the damned, the doomed, the forsaken. My name is Princess Naruto Strange, otherwise known as Naruto no Makoto, or the Princess of Destruction. It would do ye mortals well to remember this." She then, creating a single ball of destruction, coated it in her atomic flames, tossed it over her shoulder, not intending to hit any of the hunter ninja. She, hearing an massive explosion, vanished as nuclear green flames consumed what was once a thriving bandit camp. 3 days later, and Naruto, taking a break from being a badass princess, was sitting on her purple float in her bikini with black shades on her face. Said float was smack dab in the middle of her pool. Floating not far from her was her new pet. Apparently her actions had once again put the fear of Kami into Kumo and Iwa. This got the old man to sign all of the papers she needed to get herself and pet. Of course, she teaching said old man and her sensei to defeating the evil known as paperwork most likely had something to do with it. Her new pet was a present from Setsuna, and it was a baby hydra. Naruto had no clue how Setsuna got a hold of this legendary beast, but she didn't care as she finally had a pet. Of course, said pet was very protective and tended to hiss at anyone she didn't know. Yugao was out on a mission as apparently the Fire Lord had no clue about the bandit camps and now had placed the mission to scout for any more. Naruto, reaching forward, grabbed her strawberry and gin drink and took a sip. She had discovered her love for this mix after a long day dealing with the idiotic council. Apparently the civilians still thought they had control over her as they had tried to force her to marry several women and men. She had slapped the hell out of a lot of them for this, and Tsunade had handed her a nice drink. Naruto, sighing in peace, had no clue how the old man dealt with the bottom feeders known as the Civilian Council. She blinked when her little Alexandria hissed loudly. Looking up, she giggled, spotting Ino in a bikini. Ino, rolling her eyes as she had already met Alexandria several times, placed her towel down and climbed into the pool. She, swimming over to the hydra, gently pet her. Alexandria, going from hissing at Ino to nuzzling her hand, instantly recognized the blonde-haired woman who feed her fish. Naruto, giggling as her pet nuzzled one of her girls, watched as Ino swam over to her and asked, "Since when did you start drinking?" Naruto, giving Ino a gentle kiss on the lips, said, "Since the imbecilic Civilian Council tried to make me marry several women and men." Ino, hearing this, scowled and asked, "Did my dad do anything about that?" Naruto, chuckling, said, "Your dad informed them that you and I were dating, and then when they said so, told them to go rot in a ditch somewhere." Ino giggled hearing this and asked, "Why are they so stupid?" Naruto, shrugging, said, "Because being an idiot is free and easy, while being a productive member of society is hard and expensive." Ino then laughed as a truer statement had never been uttered. Ino then, kicking back into the pool, started to float as she told Naruto and Alexandria about the last mission her team went on. Naruto, laughing as Ino revealed to her that she pissed her pants when a cat snuck up on her. Ino, glaring at Naruto, said, "It's not funny." Naruto, with a hand over her mouth trying to stop her giggling, said, "No Ino, it's hilarious." Ino rolled and shut her eyes, deciding to float. Naruto blinked when out of her home came both Tsunade and Shizune. Both females were wearing bikini. Naruto nearly had an heart attack spotting Tsunade in her bikini as the damn glorious orbs she had were nearly visible. She, cutting her eyes to Ino, could see that her blonde-haired Wonder Woman was trying and failing to hold back a nosebleed. Alexandria, already liking Tsunade and Shizune, made a pleased sound and using her tail paddled over to the two women and nuzzled them. Shizune, giggling, picked up the hydra and said, "Hello Alexandria, you're looking lovely." Alexandria nuzzled Shizune while Tsunade slipped into the pool. The blonde-haired woman sighed and the cooling water of the pool soothed the aches in her muscles and bones. Naruko, watching as the water eased the gravity off of the bra busters Tsunade called, shook her head and asked, "So what are you doing here, sensei, Shizune?" Shizune, smiling, said, "The Chunin exams are coming up in about 2 weeks. We're officially here to ask you if you would like to participate." Naruko, blinking, asked, "Will the Chunin exams have strong people to fight?" Tsunade, rolling her eyes, said, "Yes, brat, there will be strong people to fight." Naruko, smiling, said, "Then I'm in." Ino, rolling her eyes, asked, "Did you get the bingo book this week, Tsunade-sama?" Shizune, blinking, said, "Actually we did, we were given it by Anko-san saying that we should check it out." Naruko and Ino were curious about this. Tsunade, reaching into her coat, grabbed the little black book known as the bingo book and opened it. Flipping through it, she found most of the ones she was used to. Sighing, she was about to close the book when she came across an entry that made her gasp. She, looking up at Naruko, asked, "How in the 9 hells did you become the first genin to be entered in the bingo book?" Naruko, blinking, asked, "Sensei, say what now?" Tsunade, handing her the bingo book, revealed an image of her from her mission with green flames burning in front of her. Her eyes widened and she asked, "What in the name of the Kyuubi's furry?" Ino, leaning over her shoulder, gasped and asked, "Why in the hell are you named the Princess of Destruction?" Naruko, turning to Ino, said, "Because of my bloodline, the power of destruction." She then, turning back to the page, read what they listed about her. She snorted as they had wrote down what she had said, word for word. It's like they didn't have an original bone in their body. Shaking her head, she smiled and said, "They listed me as an B rank threat, but still gave me an flee on sight order." Ino asked, "You have a summon?" Naruko, turning to Ino, said, "Actually I have several. The one they're talking about is called the Shape and he's part of one of my bloodlines. He's a ruthless, cold-blooded killer who would make Orochimaru of the Sannin beg for his mommy." All eyes widened hearing this, and Tsunade asked, "Why in the 9 hells do you have a summon like that?" Naruko, shrugging, said, "Because during the mission to Wave I managed to broker several summoning contracts along with a bloodline before I accepted becoming the youngest strange." Ino, hearing this, asked, "Yeah, I've been meaning to ask you about your last name. Why strange?" Naruko, giving Ino a plain look, asked, "You don't think my family is strange?" Ino blinked and asked, "That's why you went with the last name Strange?" Naruko, nodding, said, "Yes." Ino wasn't the only who gained a sweat drop. Naruko, ignoring this, picked up her drink and scowled as it was empty. Snapping her fingers, she blinked when her glass was refilled. Curious, she asked, "What just happened?" She blinked when the voice of Tsukiko could be heard saying, "Your divine authority happened, dear sister." Naruko, turning, smiled as Tsukiko was now sitting in a beach chair by the pool, in a bikini. Naruko asked, "What do you mean divine authority?" Tsukiko, sighing, said, "You're the daughter of a primordial, and the sister of 3 goddesses, thus by default you have a divine authority." Naruko was about to ask when Setsuna's voice could be heard saying, "Not to mention that if you're ever killed in battle you'll transcend your mortal chains and become a divine." Naruko, turning, found Setsuna in a bikini sipping on a Long Island iced tea. Ino, seeing where Naruko got her amazing body from, asked, "Naruko is going to be a god?" Amaya, appearing rubbing sunscreen in her skin, said, "No, my future sister-in-law. Naruko is already a goddess. She is simply in human form waiting for the correct catalyst to ascend. Said catalyst is most likely a glorious death in a battle worthy of godhood." Naruko, blinking several times, asked, "What is this pool party day?" Diana, appearing in another lawn chair reading a book, giggled and said, "Yes, Naru-chan, it is." Naruko, hearing this answer, sweat dropped. Shaking her head, she snapped her fingers and smiled when Konohamaru, Moegi and Udon all appeared in their swimwear. Konohamaru, blinking, looked around but smiled as they were no longer stuck in Iruka's boring lecture. Moegi, giggling, said, "Thanks, Nei-chan." Naruko, waving the thanks off, still felt like something was missing. She then, feeling Yugao enter the village from her mission, smirked and snapped her fingers. Yugao blinked, finding herself in her bikini floating on a heart-shaped float in Naruko's huge pool. Turning, she smiled, spotting said goddess, along with several others. Naruko giggling said, "Now all that we're missing is someone cooking some food and some music and we'll be having a party." Diana, snapping her fingers, said, "Got it covered." A poof of smoke occurred and suddenly summertime music could be heard, as a white-haired, big woman manned the turntables. Food could then be smelt cooking as an somewhat angry black-haired woman appeared. Naruko, blinking, asked, "Who are they?" Setsuna, waving her hand, made an image of the white-haired woman serving drinks at a bar, said, "Providing us with music is Marajan Strauss, S-class mage from the Guild fairy tale. Mother and I, knowing your attraction to powerful but kind women, decided to start helping you woo her and many others from her reality." Naruko, hearing this, blinked several times and then gave Setsuna a plain look. Setsuna, recognizing the look, said, "Don't worry, we're not brainwashing them or anything. You'll still have to work your off to impress them. We've just set up some things that should help." Naruko, sighing, turned to Tsukiko, who giggled and said, "This woman is the unhappy housewife Chi-Chi, and she's from a reality I quite frankly want you to take over and make your own." Naruko, hearing this, blinked several times and asked, "Why would you want that?" Tsukiko, giving Naruko a gorgeous smile, said, "Because once you ascend, you're going to need somewhere you rule with an iron fist. This place would make the perfect kaiju playground, plus there's strong fighters for you." Naruko, hearing strong fighters, gained a brilliant smile of her own. Yugao, giggling at this, asked, "Why is she unhappy?" Tsukiko, giggling, said, "Because her husband is too busy training to take care of her needs and desires." Naruko, shaking her head, said, "How foolish. If she were mine, we'd be cuddling right now." Ino, quirking an eyebrow, asked, "Really? I'm one of yours and we're not cuddling?" Naruko, giving a very arousing smirk, said, "That's because you're way over there instead of right next to me, or better yet on top of me." Ino blushed hearing this, while Amaya rolled her eyes and said, "That was supremely cheesy, Naru-chan." Setsuna, a little jealous of Ino and Yugao, said, "Hush Amaya, you're just jealous because no one wants to do that with you." Amaya scowled hearing this but stayed silent. Konohamaru, noticing something, asked, "Boss, why are all of the members of your family like super gorgeous and built?" Diana, turning a page in her book, said, "I can answer this. It's because as goddesses we're meant to inspire desire to men and women of all species. Thus our bodies automatically replicates the desired traits and we become it." Tsunade, hearing this, asked, "So Naruko looks like an actress, because she's supposed to be attractive?" Diana, nodding, said, "Yes. Right now you, Shizune, Ino and Yugao are all extremely aroused and attracted to all four of us. If the three kids weren't here you'd probably try to jump us, but end up being dominated and marked by Naru-chan." Everyone blinked hearing this and Tsunade asked, "What makes you so sure she'd dominate me?" All four goddesses gave her a plain look and Tsukiko asked, "What makes you so sure she wouldn't?" Tsunade, smirking, said, "I'm a cage-level kunoichi." Amaya, rolling her eyes, said, "Naruko is a god-level kunoichi who could exterminate this entire planet if she wanted to." All eyes widened hearing this. Well, those belonging to mortals. Naruko, knowing she was very strong, didn't know she was that powerful. Ino, with wide eyes, asked, "Are you really that strong, Naruko?" Naruko, shrugging, said, "I have no clue, Ino, but chances are that I am." The jaws dropped hearing this and Tsunade asked, "Remind me again, why are you a genin with that kind of power?" Diana, giggling, said, "Because she wants to climb the ranks normally and become Hokage." Naruko nodded to this statement and picked up her drink. Taking a sip, she said, "I." Everyone's sweat dropped hearing this. The party then picked back up and everyone laughed. 3 days later and Naruko was at a training ground working on creating an actual attack with her power of destruction. It was proving most difficult as destruction didn't want to be shaped or molded. She was dressed in a pair of shorts and a sports bra. Tsunade and Shizune were at the hospital taking care of some dumbass ninja who had gotten beat up by a pissed Konohamaru. They should have known better as he was her little brother and she had given him the kaiju awakening bloodline. She wasn't sure what kaiju he was, but she knew it was most likely deadly. She sighing decided to take a break. Sitting down she summoned her teacup from her home. She was about to snap her fingers and have it filled when it was filled up by a kettle. Looking up she smiled spotting Tsukiko dressed in what looked like training gear. Tsukiko giggling sat down after pouring herself a cup of tea. Naruto taking a small sip of her tea sighed as it was her favorite kind. She asked, "Not that I'm not glad to see you, but what's up?" She with a smile on her face said, "We learned that Amaya gave you another bloodline." Naruto remembering said bloodline said, "Yeah, it's actually pretty cool, specifically when I go on night hunts or that one time I searched that entire desert for that one little lizard." Tsukiko giggled remembering said event and asked, "Would you like another one?" Naruto hearing this questions actually thought about it. She asked, "Would this new bloodline be from you?" Tsukiko nodding said, "Yes." Naruto rubbing her chin asked, "Would this new bloodline be as difficult as the power of destruction is proving to be right now?" Tsukiko shaking her head said, "Heavens no." Naruto asked, "Would this bloodline make me even more powerful?" Tsukiko nodding said, "Oh yes." Naruto curious asked, "Where would this new bloodline hail from?" Tsukiko giggling said, "The same place Miragen hails from." This statement really piqued Naruto's interest. Taking another sip of her tea she asked, "Would you tell me about said place so I can be prepared when I eventually travel there?" Tsukiko nodding started to indeed tell her little sister about the dimension Miragen was from. Naruto with wide eyes asked, "Are the mages strong?" Tsukiko nodding said, "Miragen herself is an S-class mage, but doesn't participate in quest anymore." Naruto hearing this smiled as a potential love was actually powerful. Spotting that her tea was empty she refilled it along with the cup of her sister. Tsukiko thanking her said, "The bloodline I would be giving you would be like that of her friend Natsu. It wouldn't exactly be Dragonslayer magic, but would be more like Godslayer or Bijou Slayer magic." Naruto hearing this blinked and asked, "Why can't it be Dragonslayer magic?" Tsukiko giving her a smile said, "Dear sister, you're basically a dragon with most of your kaiju forms. Hell, when you unlock your King Ghidorah form you'll literally be a three-headed dragon, so being a Dragonslayer would meaning being able to slay yourself." Naruto hearing this asked, "So what you're saying is that I'm already a Dragonslayer?" Tsukiko thinking about this nodded and said, "I guess in a way you are. Anyway, your new bloodline will actually have two parts. The first of course coming from the dimension of Miragen. The second part comes from this dimension and will help you with illusions. Basically you will be able to harness the illusionary prowess of the moon giving you the literal ability to bend reality to your will." Naruto whistled hearing this ability and giggled as it would help her with her crush on Yuhi Kurenai as the woman was known as the Genjutsu mistress for a reason. Tsukiko smiling said, "Now then I'd love to spend more time with you Naru-chan, but sadly I have the cursed paperwork to deal with." She then vanished with a glint of silver. Naruto smiled as that was kind of a cool way to vanish. She getting up waved her hand as her teacup vanished. Cracking her knuckles she decided break time was over and got back to her intense training. 3 hours later and Naruto no closer to her goal had decided to call it day, as she was supposed to be resting up for the Chunin exams in 2 days anyway. Grabbing her gear she was about to head home when Yugao in her official Anbu gear appeared. Curious she asked, "What's up Anbu-san?" Yugao responded with, "Hokage-sama and the council have requested your presence." She hearing this groaned wondering what the infernal civilians wanted with her now. Shaking her head she activated her divine authority and changed from her training gear into her fancy kimono. Now dressed she said, "Alright, let's go, but so help me God if the civilians try anything I'll flay them alive." The Anbu nodded and vanished taking Naruto along with them. Appearing in the council chambers Naruto blinked spotting a very busty blonde-haired Kumo Kunoichi. Curious she blinked when Hiruzen said, "She's here now, kindly explain your purpose here Samui-san." Samui nodding reached into her pocket and pulled out a scroll. She setting her deep gray eyes on Naruto said, Naruto, strange for taking out 4 of our missing ninja, the Raikage has granted you diplomatic immunity. Everyone blinked hearing this and Naruto asked, really, that's all I get for taking out 4 Kumo missing ninja? Samui shaking her head said, you misunderstand me, my lady. As a princess you already have diplomatic immunity. He's just confirming it so that no Kumo ninja will mistake you for an enemy and attack. Naruto rolled her eyes and asked, is that the only reason I'm here? Because if it is, your Raikage and I will have to have a long talk. Hiruzen hearing this and knowing that Naruto meant she'd be hurting the Raikage asked, there's more, right, Samui-san? Samui, a little pale as she'd seen the damage Naruto's attacks done, nodded and said, yes. The other reason I am here is to inform Konoha that my Raikage, realizing the mistakes of his father, wants to create a stable alliance with Konoha. She heard everyone in the room snort, including Naruto, who asked, does your Kage think us fools? The last time Kumo wanted a stable alliance with us, Hiyashi-san lost a brother, Hinata lost an uncle, and that pompous known as Neji lost a father. Samui flinched hearing this and said, yes, Raikage-sama knows this, and she was cut off by Naruto, who said, he believes that we'll be foolish enough to accept another deal so he can try to steal another of our bloodline carriers, and breed them like crazy. Samui shaking her head quickly said, no, my lady. Naruto crossing her arms under her asked, then what? Samui said, we have no intention of trying to steal a bloodline carrier from Konoha. Raikage-sama and the Council of Kumo, knowing that the last attempt at establishing a stable alliance was a disaster, have come up with the perfect way. Naruto and the others, now curious, asked, what is this so-called perfect way? Samui smiling said, the Raikage offers myself, Samui ni, and Mabui of Kumo as wives to you, Princess Naruto Strange. Naruto's eyes widened and Hiruzen nearly choked on his pipe hearing this. Hell, everyone had a reaction, including the hidden Yugao, who was being restrained by her fellow Anbu. Naruto, giving her a plain look, asked, are you out of your damn mind? Samui blinking asked, does this agreement not please you, my lady? 2 strong and gorgeous women to be your wives. Naruto was about to speak when in a flash of light Amaya appeared holding yet another pet for Naruto. This pet made Naruto gain hearts for eyes. In Amaya's arms was a baby saber-toothed tiger. In a flash the tiger was in Naruto's arms as she nuzzled the primal beast with pure adoration in her eyes. Amaya giggling turned and blinked, spotting the council. Raising an eyebrow she turned to the hidden and still being restrained Yugao and asked, what did I interrupt? Soon recovering from her shock was about to answer when another flash of light occurred. This time it was Setsuna who appeared. She was holding 2 massive blades that glowed with power. Naruto, nuzzling her new pet, blinked, spotting the swords and asked, what are those? Setsuna, sending a smirk at Amaya, said, these 2 are legendary blades known as Excalibur and Soul Edge. I, knowing that you have Kenjutsu specialist girlfriend, decided to get you these 2 as a present. Naruto, titling her head and ignoring how all the females in the room squealed slightly, created a clone to hold her new baby. Walking over, she accepted the crystalline blue sword first. She moaned as a massive influx of serene power washed down over the entire village. The massive blade actually purring at being in contact with her, transformed into a solid blue katana with a crystal guard. Naruto, accepting the one that seemed demonic next, screamed a little bit as a searing pain spread through her. She then moaned again as the pain vanished and a monstrous killing intent washed over the village. This sword, also purring, transformed into a spear. Naruto, liking her 2 new weapons, friends, smiled brightly at Setsuna and said, thanks, Setsuna-ne. Setsuna beamed as even with Amaya's head start Naruto had called her sister first. Amaya, with a scowl on her face, asked, will someone answer my question please? Yugao, appearing in her civilian attire and glaring at Samui, said, Amaya-sama, the Kunoichi from Kumo suggested my Naruto Hime marry her and some other female from Kumo to solidify the fragile and nearly broken alliance between Konoha and Kumo. Amaya and Setsuna both blinked hearing this. Setsuna, settling into her interrogator persona, turned to Samui and asked, "Do you have any ulterior motives to wanting to marry my little sister?" Samui, shaking her head, said, "No, my lady." Amaya, standing in front of Naruto protectively, now narrowed her eyes and asked, "Why did you choose her?" Samui said, "It was either her or Sasuke Uchiha, but he's an enemy of your clan and Kumo would rather not piss of the Princess of Destruction or her clan." Setsuna, snorting, said, "Even if you had chosen that sniveling piece of shit, he's a prisoner of our clan and locked in an eternal cycle of punishment for using my little sister as a human shield." Samui, hearing this, nodded. Amaya asked, "How obedient of a wife would you be and if Naruto makes an enemy of a clan?" Samui said, "I'd do everything she asks within reason. As for the second question, if they're an enemy of Naruto, then they're an enemy of mine and Kumo." Setsuna asked, "What rank were you, and we need to see this Mabui person?" Samui, nodding, handed a picture to Setsuna and said, "I was a Jonin." Amaya, looking at the picture along with Setsuna, whistled as Mabui was very pretty. Naruto, looking over the other shoulder, blushed as Mabui was very pretty, of course not as beautiful as her Yugao-chan but damn close. Yugao, also looking at the picture, got a little jealous as Mabui had a large bust also. Setsuna, looking at Samui, asked, "How long does the family have to think this over?" The civilian council blinked hearing her say family. One of the more idiotic ones asked, "What do you mean the family? This is a council manner and we'll handle it." Amaya and Setsuna, both giving him a plain look, said, "No, as our little sister is a goddess by all means and the youngest member of our clan, thus it is a clan matter." He went to open his mouth again when Naruto said, "Shut your damn mouth and no ya roll ya tool." Setsuna and Amaya couldn't stop the snickers if they had tried. The ninja side of the council were all trying very hard not to burst into laughter. Hiruzen actually had his fist shoved into his mouth to keep himself from laughing. The counselor turned bright red with anger and said, "Watch it, you little demon. If the council says it, then you'll spread your legs like the good little whore you are." He had uttered his last statement in the mortal world. Naruto, vanishing, appeared in front of the man and said, "Goodbye, ya piece of shit." She then grabbed his face and sent him to her personal dimension. She then, snapping her fingers, made one of her summons appear. She blinked as this summon was new. It was a woman wearing a creepy bunny mask that had a veil on the back. She was holding a hatchet and humming an even creepier song. She, turning to Amaya, asked, "Who is this?" Tsukiko, appearing, said, "One of the new members of your killer summons. Her name is the Huntress." Naruto, turning to her, said, "All right then, go play with that fool before sacrificing him to the entity." The Huntress nodded and vanished. Naruto blinked when the cries of several civilian counselors could be heard, saying she couldn't do that. Rolling her eyes, she snapped her fingers and they vanished to suffer the same fate as the fool from before. She, turning to what remained of the civilian council, asked, "Anyone else wanna step outside of their roles?" They all, terror-stricken, shook their heads no. Samui, a little terrified by this display, said, "You have until the end of the second part of the Chunin exams to think this over. My Genin team will be participating this year, so I'm here with them." Setsuna, nodding, said, "All right then." Naruto, turning to the old man, asked, "Is that all?" Samui nodded. Hiruzen and the rest of the council also nodded. Naruto, smiling, said, "Good, then I'm going home to get my new lovely settled, introduce her to her sister, cook myself and my live-in girlfriend something to eat and then take a shower. If any of you besides the old man needs something, run it through Tsunade-sensei, Shizune-sensei, Ino-chan or the old man." She then, wrapping her arm around Yugao, said, "Peace out, bitches." She then vanished in a swirl of atomic flames. Amaya and Setsuna giggled at this and vanished to convene with Diana and Tsukiko. 1 hour later, and Naruto was sitting in her hot spring with both Yugao and Ino relaxing as the steam and hot water eased the tension. Naruto, with her bathing suit on, reached and grabbed her drink, this one non-alcoholic. It was just a simply glass of, and she enjoyed it. Yugao, in her bathing suit, still was pissed at the audacity of Kumo to try and steal her bae away from her. with some big bimbo and her brown-skinned friend. She wasn't happy about this at first, but then she, after talking to Ino, realized that Naruko deserved all of the love in the world. Ino, topless with her hair up, was close to moaning as the soothing hot water relaxed her tense and slightly sore muscles. Taking her training seriously was doing her body good, but damn if it didn't leave her sore and a little pissed. Alexandria, nuzzling her new sibling, was making sure the little tiger was okay. Audrey, nuzzling her big sister back, had no plans of getting in that water with her mama, no matter how much she wanted to. Naruko, being able to feel the tension rolling off of Yugao, asked, "Babe, you do know you and Ino are always going to be my loves, and anyone that comes along will have to have your approval, right?" Yugao, hearing this, smiled and said, "I do, but it's nice to have some confirmation." Ino, chuckling, said, "I wasn't worried a bit." Naruko, giggling, said, "Of course you weren't. You're Ino Yamanaka and you're a very confident woman." Both Yugao and Naruko giggled as Ino puffed out her chest, as this was a true statement. Naruko then blinked when Amaya appeared and moaned in delight. Naruko, curious, asked, "Did you already come to a decision?" Amaya, nodding, said, "We came to the same decision your girls came to. You, dear sister, deserve more love than two females can give, thus we've agreed to this deal." She, moaning as the water massaged her muscles, said, "Besides, we all know you're a kind of girl." Naruko, snorting, said, "I am not." Ino, agreeing with Naruko, nodded and said, "Yeah, she's not a girl. She's an girl." Naruko, shaking her head, said, "Not an girl either." Yugao, nodding, said, "Yeah, she's a eyes girl." Naruko, shaking her head vigorously, said, "No. You assume that I pick my girls for trivial reasons such as large, perfect, or gorgeous eyes. I pick my girls and they pick me because I see their personalities in